many different ways. And one of the things I've been considering is not just considering blessings as gifts, but instead, what is the true purpose of them? Throughout life, it's easy to think about working one's way towards retirement. Spending your whole life with this end goal of being able to hang your hat, hang up your hat, and be able to retire and not have to work again. However, when you think about that, what is the true purpose of life if not to work, or if not to have the ability to stay busy and working, whatever that work might be? And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's very common that we see many people who have worked their whole life, that have been very busy, been busy with whatever they're engaged in, and then all of a sudden they retire into a life of idleness, and then they pass away shortly thereafter. And I think that I don't think it's really a coincidence of that. This same kind of mindset, I've heard of some people within the church, within some congregations, where they have even used this phrase that, oh, well, I can pass on this opportunity to teach, or I can pass on this opportunities to work in the church because I'm retired from teaching. And we were talking about this morning, looking at Paul's example. This idea of placing your life on cruise control, that wasn't in Paul's vocabulary. I mean, we were talking about chapter 4 this morning with Logan's Bible classes this morning, and so many people had left Paul, and he's facing this persecution, being in prison because of being willing to speak the truth and to help others and to teach others. Yet he didn't give up. He continued trying to teach and encourage others. Paul recognized purpose in his life, and that was beyond reaching some sort of arbitrary achievement, some sort of level of achievement. And it's not news to anybody in here that there's many people in this world that have obtained some sort of large material riches, yet that they don't have any happiness. Growing up, I often look at blessings as something that makes your life easier, or something that increases your level of comfort. And as I became older and I started to understand what the psalmist was writing in chapter 127 of how children are a great and wonderful blessing. And they truly are wonderful blessings. They bring us so much joy that more than anything else that I can think of here on earth. But I don't think anybody would describe children as being easy, or the amount of added responsibility as being light. I would propose to you this morning that satisfaction comes not just from the possession of an individual blessing, but the appropriate and the effective application or the use of that blessing for a purpose. Today I want to talk about satisfaction and purpose that we have in our calling to be stewards of God, of what God has entrusted to us. First, when we look at the word stewardship, what does it mean? It's not simply just a protection of an asset. Simply put, one way to put it is a very deliberate and active effort to manage and to implement assets for the owner. Being a steward would involve being entrusted with the development and security of something important. The word steward comes from oikonomos and is used to describe a house distributor or overseer. In the scriptures, there's many references to Christians being servants or stewards for God. And you can see that in Romans 6:18, Colossians 3:24, Luke chapter 12, starting at 35. There's many other places as well. But let's talk about some of the principles or the features that can help define what stewardship is. Stewardship first is there is an expectation of results. In Luke 12, Jesus is comparing the faithful servant, which is a good servant, a good steward for God, as compared to the evil servant. And another principle here that we want to look at too is found in verse 48, where he says, "But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more." So while expectations exist, it also correlates to what they had in their control. Not everyone is the same. We all have different attributes and measured in different ways. What's important is what we do with what we have. We'll touch on this later, but in 1 Corinthians 12, starting at verse 12, Paul was describing the one body and how all the members, although different, each serve a purpose and are needed for the full function of the body. A steward has responsibilities. He or she has been entrusted with the master's property. They must be reliable and trustworthy. They need to have a high moral integrity and a good work ethic. Paul says that one must be faithful in their duties. If you go over to 1 Corinthians 4, starting at verse 1, it says, "Let a man so consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful." And we mentioned Luke 12 earlier, but if you go to verse 42 of Luke 12, "And the Lord said, Who then is that faithful and wise steward?" We are entrusted with many things, and we know that all these things belong to God. Even our own bodies are not our own. 1 Corinthians 6, starting at verse 19. We should even use our own bodies to glorify God. Also, a steward is accountable to the master for how we manage his property. And so how do we discharge our duties as stewards? Yeah, Hebrews 4 verse 13 says, "And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account." So what are some things we can be stewards of? Oftentimes you would think of money or material assets. And there's kind of three generic ways to manage or handle money. And the first one many people focus on their time and effort on, and that is the earning or giving increase side. And the second would be savings and not being wasteful. But the third is often overlooked, and it's equally important, and that is the using or the giving effectively with purpose. God doesn't want us to allow the collection of physical wealth to be our focus, and then therefore be a de facto idol of ours that we serve. In Luke 16:13 it says, "No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." And we don't have time this morning to dive too much into greed, but and its potential for damage. But just for the context, 1 Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." Physical wealth is not what's important in life, and it should not be what consumes our attention. We'll go back to Luke 12, chapter 12 and verse 15. Jesus said, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." And of course, in James 1 verse 17, all good things come from above. So how do we use money as good stewards? First, we can use these blessings to provide for our family, as we're instructed in 1 Timothy 5:8. We're living in a society that's placing less and less emphasis on families, taking care of families, or neglecting our responsibility to take care of our own family. Some would rather push these responsibilities onto the government or the state and neglect those responsibilities. Another way that we can do this is to help those in need. Through giving, others can be positively influenced, and the glory can be given to God. When we know the person that is, when somebody is being helped and they know that person that's helping them, then they know they're motivated and they're appreciated in a different way, because they know that the sacrifice is being made on their behalf. Again, leaving this up to a faceless, inefficient government program, it takes away that ability to give that glory to God. Another way is to give back for the work of the church on the first day of the week, as Paul instructs in 1 Corinthians 16. Our focus is not laying up treasures on the earth, but in heaven. Where our treasures are, there our heart will be also. Remember, it doesn't matter how much or little money we have, it's how we use what we have been entrusted with. So what's another thing that we can be stewards of? One thing that comes to mind is our talents or skills that we might have. God blesses us in many different ways. Let's think of what kind of skills or talents that we can consider an asset. Some people are blessed with public speaking. Obviously, I'm not one of those, but there's skills that we should push ourselves to try to develop, and then also hone in on what talents we do have. It would be a real shame to have been invested a talent from God and not bring Him glory by using it for His service. Time is often considered our biggest asset. You can often tell somebody's true priorities by where they spend their time. You don't have to have a dime in your name to really make an impact on somebody and show that you truly care about them by spending your time by being with them. In Job chapter 8, verse 9, it says, "Our days on earth are a shadow." And in James 4:14, it says, "Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away." So time is a blessing. Are we maximizing it for God's glory? If we look at each day as an individual blessing from God, then that might help us prioritize what truly needs to be done. And we'll strive for efficiency in our time management. Again, time is precious, and we should do everything that we do. We should do in the glory of God. Another thing is children. They're a blessing, sometimes a challenge, and definitely it brings a lot of responsibility. But I would say there's no greater rewarding responsibility that we have here on earth than being entrusted with God's precious children. One thing that we're responsible for is establishing boundaries and enforcing those boundaries. Proverbs 29 verse 15 says, "The rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother." Our correction must be appropriate. It needs to serve its purpose, not provoking them to wrath, bringing them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. A parent who corrects their child loves their child. Any parent knows that discipline is not pleasant for either the parent or the child. But if you truly love them, you feel correct. Hebrews 12:11 says, "Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. We not only want them to obey, but to learn the why. Why should they obey? Sometimes, particularly while they're young, they just need the trust. But it's important that when able, that we take the time to explain to them the why, so that they can kind of piece together the reasoning that they're being corrected, and that increases and strengthens their faith. It's tempting to always use the phrase, "because I said so," but we have to be careful with this, because this really teaches them to blindly obey just authoritative positions, and we think of the logical fallacy of an appeal to authority, where an argument is settled purely because the so-called expert says so. And there's no room for reason or for searching the scriptures. And we see so many people in the so-called religious world that falsely and blindly follow false teachers as a result. We must be involved in their training and their upbringing. We must be aware of the influences that they're being exposed to. This could be at school, it could be on television, online activities, it could be friends that they spend their time with. There's two sayings that I attach to when I'm thinking of influences, and one is we can't continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and expect and be surprised when they come back to Romans. Be careful of the influence, who you're sending your children to for those influences. And another one is you are the average of your 5 closest friends. Be aware of the friends that they are associated with. We need to emphasize their spiritual development over all things. Do we spend more time thinking about what our children will grow up to be in the secular world, what kind of jobs they'll have? Do we spend more time considering that than establishing the foundation in faith that will keep them in God's fold? We can't idly sit by simply hoping that they'll grow closer to God. We need to be setting the example. Peter said in 2 Peter 3:18, grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Are we doing that in our own lives, setting that example? Even when they've grown up and moved away, maybe they've gotten married and started their own lives. We're no longer in that place of authority over them. However, our goal should have been to foster a relationship where they respect and are willing to come and approach us for counsel, so that we can continue to push them towards and influence them, pointing them to Christ. The time and the correction that we take now as an investment can have generational effects, far more than any physical wealth that we might pass on. There's many examples of stewardship. The last I want to talk about this morning is being a steward of the gospel message. In 2 Corinthians 4, verses 1 through 7, Paul says that we have this treasure to share. The power of the gospel is with God, and we're simply his instruments in distributing it to others. So how do we serve as stewards of the gospel? First, we need to study it so that we can correctly understand it. 2 Timothy 2:15 and 1 Timothy 4:13. A good soldier familiarizes and trains with the sword so that it is a seamless extension of his hand. He's well versed in its implementation and in wielding it in battle, and it becomes second nature to him. If we're soldiers of Christ and the scriptures are our sword, are we investing the time we need to be training ourselves in its use? We can't be a good steward of the gospel if we don't obey and show Christ in our lives. We have to practice what we preach, so to speak. Matthew 7, verse 21 says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. If we are stewards of the gospel, our job is to give God increase, and we are to spread this good news. However, if we're not being genuine, if we teach one thing but our example shows something else, that people can see right through hypocrisy. Would you go to a financial planner if this person couldn't pay their own bills? Probably not. We must keep our faith pure and hold fast to sound doctrine. Many different references. Some of those being 2 Timothy 2:15, Galatians 1:6 and 10, and many others. Let's go over to 1 Peter 4, verse 10 through 11. It says, as each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. If anyone speaks, let him speak as the oracles of God. If anyone ministers, let him do it as with the ability which God supplies, that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom belong the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. The gospel message is like other blessings. It's not simply enough for us to protect it and put our master's belongings in safe storage, so to speak. He desires us to implement and to use the blessings that he provided as he intended. Let's read a parable that Christ spoke in Matthew 25. And of course, this is the parable of the talents, starting in verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. And then the same could be said with the one who was given 2 talents. So then we go down to where he's talking to the one who took his 1 talent and hid it. In verse 26, it says, but his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. You ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Everything we have is borrowed, and it will be returned. It's, of course, entrusted to us for protection, development, and increase. And, of course, we're not just talking about material wealth, but all the blessings that we talked about earlier. We're going to give an account to the master for his assets and what we did with them. We also see in this parable that not everybody has identical opportunities or talents. In verse 15 it says, to each according to his own ability. We see a lot in the news, and we're tempted to think in terms of equality, but God is concerned with what God is concerned with is what someone does with what they've been given. It's unwise for someone to say that since someone else was given more, that it's not fair, and therefore they don't have to. There's nothing that's expected of them. Just like it's unwise for someone who was given much to compare what he brings to the master compared to the one that was given little. It is good to note that God has given everything that we need, to be good and acceptable students. Christ used us, it shows us in this parable that our calling as Christians and our responsibility to use what God has given to us to bring glory and honor to Him. Additionally, notice that how we were created for work. Throughout mankind, God expects work from us. He expects us to use our skills, our talent, and time to be good students. It's not any surprise that God included effort on our part for salvation. Of course, it's not because of our effort that we are saved, because of the grace that's been extended to us. And nothing that we can do can earn salvation. But we do still have to act on His plan. We have to act on His grace. This morning, if you are in need of starting your journey as a steward of God and are ready to be baptized and rising up as a new creature, ready to serve, or maybe as we reflect on our own lives, at some point maybe we've stopped being that good and faithful servant, that good steward, and need the prayers of the congregation, if you would come forward as we stand and sing.